It's time for Forever Home Friday, where we're teaming up with local shelters to help adorable animals find the loving homes that they all deserve. Today we're joined by Reese Merriman from Cats of West Central Illinois, and they've brought along three sweet kittens with us, Juan and Spruce, and remind me the other one's name?
We've got Juan and Velvet.
Juan, Spruce, and Velvet. All right, we got three of them. I'm joined by Reese and Adeline, right? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. So tell us a little bit more about these three cats and what the personalities are like.
So we've got Velvet. So she is a 4-month-old female. She is a very chill little girl, but still likes to play. She's been socialized with dogs and cats, and so she's just ready to go. And then Spruce and Juan are 3-month-old males, and they are also very chill. And Velvet's a little camera shy today, so she's kind of running around. But you can tell Juan and Spruce are definitely our chill, lay around, hang out kittens.
For sure. Can I hold one of them?
Oh, yeah.
Let me put this down.
They love to be held.
So which one is this?
This is Spruce.
Spruce? Hi, Spruce. Yeah. How are you doing?
Hey,
Sorry, guys, getting too caught up here with these awesome cats that you guys should definitely adopt. How did these three kittens come to be at Cats of West Central Illinois?
So it is full kitten season right now. So we are always, as is every shelter right now, getting requests to take in kittens. So this was just part of the group. They were found as strays, and we brought them in. We are over 50 kittens right now in our rescue. It's full kitten chaos.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So these three, are they all related? Are they all bonded?
They're not related,
Okay.
but they were all in the same foster since they were young. So they've been around each other for a while.
Gotcha. Adeline, you look like you're having a great time with that cat over there, are you? Yeah, I get it. Yep. All right. So these kittens, if people want to adopt them, how can they do so?
So actually, we have a massive adoption event tomorrow. It is from 9:30 to 1 at the Peoria PetSmart next to Target.
Okay.
We will have over 30 kittens there for adoption.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a lot of them. So a lot. But I know, like, you know, I've been talking to local animal shelters for different stories I've covered, and there's a big need to adopt.
Big need to adopt and a big need to spay and neuter your animals. That is our biggest thing. Kitten season is really hitting us hard, all of us. And it's just a reminder to really look. There's so many low-cost programs in your area for spay and neuter. Some even have for, free depending on your county. There's just a lot of options. So we understand cost can be a factor, but definitely spay and neuter. People don't realize that kittens can become pregnant at 16 weeks old. So it keeps us busy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you were kind of talking about the cost here. If someone wants to adopt, what are those fees like?
Sure.
What
So
do they need to do?
for our kittens, they are $125. That includes their spay and neuter and vaccines, wellness check. So that alone is $100 of the cost just to get them vetted for a home. So we have a $25 that comes back to our rescue to help feed and help more cats. But you can always check out our website or our Facebook page, Cats of West Central Illinois.
Awesome. Why should people adopt and not necessarily shop?
Adopt, it's a big need. I could go on about that, but I think really just there's so many animals that are in need for various situations, either surrenders or strays, and it's just such a big issue across the nation, not just in Illinois, but really ensuring that we're adopting just to help all the rescues that are trying their best to help out the animals.
For sure. And if people want more information, where can they go?
So Facebook page, Cats of West Central Illinois, and our website is catsofwc.com, and that always has all of our available cats.
Awesome. Awesome. What should people know when adopting these cats?
Kittens are busy. So I think just biggest thing, kittens are the little curious explorers. So they love to play. But they do eventually grow up, just like puppies. So, just know they will eventually get bigger. But definitely, if you can, adopt 2 kittens, and they will keep each other well entertained. So, yes.
If you guys can hear this little guy right here is talking right into the microphone saying adopt him. So feel free to do so. Well, all right. It looks like he's getting a little